The distress signal. Director Vexilin stared at the crystalline formation spreading across the viewing port of mining colony Theta 7. Her forearms trembled as she watched the translucent structures consume another section of the outer hull. 3 months ago, this remote outpost had been the Galactic Federation's most productive neutronium mine. Now it was ground zero for something far worse than any natural disaster. The crystal plague had arrived without warning. Not a disease in the traditional sense, but a silicon-based entity that converted all matter it touched into more of itself. It grew exponentially, feeding on the colony's structures, equipment, and when they couldn't evacuate in time, its people. Vexilin had lost 30 of her crew in the first week alone. Director, we've received another response from the Federation Council, Communications Officer Zeth announced, his voice heavy with resignation. The young Altarian's blue skin had paled to almost white during their months of isolation. Vexilin didn't need to ask what it said. The Federation's position had been clear from the beginning. Theta 7 was too remote, too insignificant to risk their fleets. They had declared a quarantine zone extending 50 light-years in every direction. No ships in, no ships out. The colony and its 8,000 inhabitants were expendable. How long until the plague reaches the central dome? She asked instead. At current growth rate, 17 days, Chief Engineer Crix replied. The insectoid being's compound eyes reflected the horror of their situation. Once it breaches the main reactor, the explosion will scatter crystalline fragments across the system. Each fragment will become a new infection point. Vexilin closed all 4 of her eyes. They had tried everything. Energy weapons only made the crystals grow faster. Explosives scattered infectious fragments. The Federation's finest scientific minds had analyzed their data and concluded there was no solution. Contain and abandon. That was the official strategy. There is one option we haven't tried, Zeth said quietly. The director turned to face him. What option? The humans. A heavy silence fell over the command center. Every spacefaring species knew about humanity, though few had direct contact with them. Earth sat on the edge of known space, a high-gravity world classified as Category 5 hostile. A death world. Its inhabitants had only achieved FTL travel 70 years ago, making them newcomers to the galactic community. The Federation kept humans at arm's length. Their homeworld had produced a species considered too unpredictable, too aggressive for full membership. Humans were notorious for their reckless approach to problem-solving and their disturbing ability to thrive in conditions that would kill most sentients. The Federation would never approve contact with Earth, Crix stated. The Federation has already written us off, Vexilin replied. She moved to the communications console. Zeth, can you reach them? The Altarian's fingers flew across the controls. Earth is nearly 200 light-years away. Even with our emergency transmitter, the signal would take. He paused, antennae twitching. Director, I'm detecting an anomaly in subspace. Multiple FTL signatures approaching our position. Hope flared in Vexilin's chest. Had the Federation changed its mind? How many ships? Counting, 47 vessels. No, wait. 63. They're still arriving. Zeth's voice rose in excitement. Director, they're transmitting Federation identity codes. The main screen flared to life, but instead of the expected Federation admiral, they saw something that made every being in the command center freeze. The figure on screen was unmistakably human. Bipedal, forward-facing eyes, and that unsettling predatory stance their species was known for. She wore a black uniform with silver insignia that didn't match any Federation ranking system. Mining Colony Theta 7. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, commanding the Expeditionary Fleet Prometheus. We received your distress signal. The human's lips pulled back, revealing those disturbing white teeth in what Vexilin had learned was called a smile. We understand you have a pest problem. Vexilin found her voice. Admiral Chen, I am Director Vexilin. How did you? We haven't sent any signal to Earth. You broadcasted on all emergency frequencies 3 days ago. We were conducting long-range reconnaissance in the Vega sector. Chen's expression grew serious. Your transmission included data on the crystal plague. We've encountered something similar before. You have. Hope and skepticism warred in Vexilon's mind. The Federation's best scientists say it's unstoppable. The Federation tends to overthink things, Chen replied bluntly. Director, I need to be clear. We're not here with the Federation's approval. In fact, they've ordered us to maintain the quarantine. I'm choosing to ignore that order. Behind Chen, Vexilon could see other humans at various stations. Their movements were quick, efficient, predatory. Everything about them screamed danger, yet they had come to help. Why? Vexilon asked. Why risk your fleet for us? Chen's smile faded. Because 3 days ago, you sent a signal into the void asking for help. On Earth, we have a saying, no one fights alone. The Federation might be willing to sacrifice 8,000 lives to contain this threat. We are not. Vexilon felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. What do you need from us? Complete data on the crystal plague, growth patterns, energy readings, everything. And start preparing your people for evacuation. This is going to get messy. As the first human vessels entered Theta 7's orbit, Vexilon noticed something that made her respiratory sacs contract. These weren't the sleek, artistic vessels favored by the Federation. These ships were angular, heavily armored, bristling with weapons. They looked like they'd been built for war. Admiral, Crix spoke up, his translator struggling with the emotion in his voice. The Federation classifies your world as Category 5 hostile. They say humans are too dangerous for contact. Why would the most dangerous species in known space come to save us? Chen's expression softened slightly. Because we know what it's like to face extinction. Earth tried to kill our species every day for millions of years. Plagues, predators, disasters. We survived them all. We learned that the only way to beat death is together. She straightened. Besides, the Federation is right about one thing. We are dangerous. But today, we're dangerous on your behalf. The human fleet continued to arrive, ship after ship dropping out of FTL. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and vessels of unknown purpose surrounded the colony. Vexilon watched in awe as humanity brought enough firepower to start a war. Admiral, the crystal plague can't be destroyed by conventional weapons, she warned. Energy attacks make it grow faster. Good thing we don't plan to use conventional weapons, Chen replied. Director, what's your colony's heat tolerance? Heat tolerance. Vexilon was confused. Standard environmental systems maintain 23 degrees. Not the habitat. The planet itself. What's the maximum temperature your underground structures can withstand? Crix consulted his displays. The deep mining shafts are rated for temperatures up to 900 degrees. Why? Chen's grin was decidedly predatory now. Because we're going to burn this entire continent down to bedrock. The crystal plague might be silicon-based, but everything has a melting point. We just need to find it. Vexilon's translator struggled with the concept. You're going to burn a continent. That's phase 1, Chen confirmed. Director, I need you to start moving all personnel to the deepest sections of your facility. And you might want to adjust your definition of aid. When humans solve problems, we don't do it quietly. As the evacuation began, Vexilon watched more human ships arrive. She noticed something else. These vessels carried markings from different human nations. United Americas, Pan-Asian Alliance, European Federation, African Union. Earth hadn't just sent a fleet. They'd sent everything they had. Zeth, she said quietly, begin full documentation of everything that happens here. The galaxy needs to know that when we called for help, the Death Worlders answered. And they didn't come to provide aid. She watched the human fleet deploy around her dying colony, weapons charging, fighters launching, dropships descending toward the surface. They came to wage war. The battle for survival. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Torres stood in the cargo bay of the assault carrier UES Prometheus, watching his combat engineers run final checks on equipment unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The other species of the Federation built weapons to be elegant, efficient, precise. Humans built weapons to solve problems permanently. Thermal charges primed and ready, Commander, Sergeant Webb reported. The Australian's scared face was hidden behind the visor of her environmental suit. Enough thermite to turn 100 square kilometers into molten glass. Torres nodded. The crystal plague fed on energy and matter, but it had limits. Everything did. The Federation's scientists had tested conventional weapons and concluded the entity was invulnerable. They hadn't tested human weapons because human weapons weren't conventional. Remember, Torres addressed his team. We're not trying to destroy it directly. We're going to create an environment where it can't exist. If this thing needs molecular structures to replicate, we'll deny it molecules. If it feeds on crystalline matrices, we'll turn everything to liquid. When Earth faced problems like this, we didn't find ways to kill them. We erased the conditions that let them live. The assault shuttles lurched as they entered Theta 7's atmosphere. Through the viewports, Torres could see the crystal plague's expansion. The mining colony was surrounded by geometric patterns of infected matter, spreading outward like frozen fractals. Beautiful and terrifying. Contact with ground forces in 60 seconds, the pilot announced. Torres activated his combat suit's systems. The powered armor was another difference between humans and the rest of the galaxy. While other species built protection, humans built weapons platforms that happened to protect the user. His suit carried enough firepower to level a city block, and that was just the standard loadout. The shuttles touched down at the designated safe zone, 5 kilometers from the plague's current edge. Torres led his team out onto the barren surface, where they joined forces with 3 other human combat units. In total, 400 human soldiers faced an entity that had already consumed half a continent. Perimeter established, Colonel Martinez announced over the tactical network. The Mexican officer commanded the ground operation, while Admiral Chen coordinated from orbit. Engineering teams, begin deployment. Infantry, maintain overwatch. If this thing shows any reaction to our presence, I want to know immediately. Torres watched his engineers work with practiced efficiency. They drilled deep holes at precise coordinates, placing thermal charges designed to create overlapping fields of destructive heat. The plan was elegant in its brutality. Create a wall of fire so intense that nothing could survive, then gradually tighten the noose. Commander, we're reading structural changes in the plague formation, Private Kim reported. The Korean soldier was monitoring sensor data from a safe distance. It's responding to our presence. Torres studied the readings. The crystal plague was shifting, its geometric patterns reorganizing. For the first time since the infection began, it wasn't simply expanding. It was preparing. It knows we're a threat, he murmured. Then, louder. All teams, accelerate deployment. This thing just became aware of us. The next hour was a race between human engineering and alien adaptation. As the thermal charges were placed, the crystal plague began growing defensive structures, spikes of infected matter rising like towers, surfaces becoming reflective to deflect energy. Fascinating, Dr. Elizabeth Mueller commented over the command channel. The German xenobiologist was observing from orbit. It's demonstrating tactical intelligence. The Federation assumed it was mindless, but it's actually sapient. Great, Colonel Martinez replied dryly. We're not just fighting a plague. We're fighting a thinking plague. All the better, Admiral Chen cut in. Thinking enemies make mistakes. Mindless forces of nature don't. Continue the operation. The first phase was complete. A massive ring of thermal charges surrounded the infected area. Torres and his team retreated to minimum safe distance as the countdown began. Detonation in 10 seconds, the automated system announced. Torres watched through his helmet's display as the charges fired simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. Pillars of white-hot flame erupted from the ground, reaching hundreds of meters into the air. The heat was so intense it created its own weather system, a firestorm that turned sand to glass and rock to lava. The crystal plague's reaction was violent. The infected structures writhed and twisted, trying to escape the heat. Some areas seemed to melt, losing their crystalline perfection. But others adapted, growing denser, more reflective. "It's fighting back," Webb observed. "Look at Sector 7. The bloody thing's actually containing the heat." She was right. Parts of the plague were creating insulation, using sacrificial layers to protect core structures. It was learning, adapting to the attack in real time. "Phase 2, Colonel Martinez ordered. "If it wants to play evolution, we'll speed things up." The second wave of human vessels descended from orbit. These weren't troop carriers, but specialized platforms carrying equipment that pushed the boundaries of physics. Graviton manipulators, particle accelerators, and devices that even Torres didn't fully understand. "What the hell is that?" someone asked as a massive cylindrical structure was lowered onto the battlefield. "Artificial singularity generator," Dr. Mueller explained with obvious excitement. "We're going to create localized black holes. Nothing survives spaghettification, not even silicon-based crystalline matrices." Torres shook his head. "Leave it to humans to weaponize black holes." The battle escalated. As each human weapon was deployed, the crystal plague adapted. When gravitational weapons tore apart its structures, it learned to disperse into smaller units. When particle beams disrupted its molecular bonds, it developed shield formations. It was evolution at hyperspeed, directed by alien intelligence. But humans didn't evolve on Earth by fighting fair. "It's learning from each attack," Dr. Mueller reported, "developing counters to everything we throw at it. Remarkable adaptation speed." "Then we stopped giving it time to adapt," Admiral Chen declared. "All units, implement Omega Protocol. Full spectrum saturation. Everything at once." Torres felt his blood chill. Omega Protocol wasn't a battle plan. It was controlled annihilation. "Admiral, that'll render this entire region uninhabitable for centuries," Colonel Martinez pointed out. "Better than letting this thing spread to other worlds," Chen replied coldly. "Besides, we're humans. We've lived in radioactive wastelands before. Execute the order." What followed was destruction on a scale the galaxy had never witnessed. Every weapon in the human arsenal fired simultaneously. Thermal charges, gravitational disruptors, antimatter bombardment, and technologies that bent the laws of physics. The surface of Theta 7 became hell incarnate. The crystal plague fought with desperate intelligence. It tried every adaptation, every evolution it had learned, but there was nowhere to hide from the onslaught. Humans weren't trying to kill it anymore. They were erasing the very possibility of its existence. Torres watched through filtered sensors as the plague began to collapse. Its perfect crystalline structures melted, shattered, and dissolved. The entity that had consumed half a continent, that had been declared unstoppable by the galaxy's finest minds, died screaming in frequencies only machines could hear. Plague signature diminishing. Sensors reported. 60%, 40, 20, 5%. "Commander, we have containment." But humans didn't trust containment. The bombardment continued until nothing remained but molten glass and scorched bedrock. Only then did Admiral Chen give the order to cease fire. "Sensor sweep," she commanded. "I want every molecule analyzed. If there's so much as a crystalline fragment left, we start over." Hours of scanning confirmed what visual observation suggested. The crystal plague was gone. Not contained, not dormant, completely eradicated. Torres stood at the edge of the devastation, looking out over what had once been a thriving mining operation. The landscape was alien now, transformed into something from humanity's darkest warnings about their own nature. "Was it worth it?" Webb asked, standing beside him. "Ask the 8,000 people we just saved," Torres replied. In the colony's command center, Director Vexilin watched the human fleet prepare for departure. The crystal plague was gone, but the scars of the battle would last forever. An entire continent had been sacrificed to stop the infection. Admiral Chen appeared on the main screen one final time. Director, the threat has been neutralized. We'll leave a monitoring station to ensure no recurrence. Your people are safe. Admiral, Vexilin struggled with words. The Federation will demand answers. You violated the quarantine, used weapons that... I don't even have words for what we witnessed. Chen nodded. They will. And when they do, tell them this. Humanity received a distress signal from beings in mortal danger. We responded. If the Federation has a problem with that, they know where to find Earth. They'll say you're too dangerous, Vexilin pointed out. That this proves humans can't be trusted with such power. Perhaps, Chen agreed. But ask them this. When the next unstoppable threat appears, when the next colony sends a desperate signal into the void, who would they rather answer? The species that writes reports about acceptable losses, or the species that brings hell itself to save innocent lives? Vexilin had no answer. As the human fleet departed, she turned to her staff. Begin transmitting everything we recorded. The full battle data, all sensor logs, every moment of what happened here. The galaxy needs to know. Know what, Director? Zeth asked. Vexilin looked at the devastated continent, then at the 8,000 lives in her colony that continued because humans had answered their call. That when the darkness comes, when hope seems lost, there's a species from a death world who doesn't understand the meaning of acceptable losses. The Federation fears them because they're dangerous. Today, we live because they are. She paused, watching the last human vessel disappear into FTL. When we called for help, the Death Worlders didn't send aid. They sent a fleet. They sent warriors who had evolved fighting the impossible and learned only one response to extinction: total war. The message went out across the galaxy, spreading faster than any plague. When colonies faced annihilation, when the Federation declared situations hopeless, there was now another option. A dangerous option, a terrifying option, but an option nonetheless. Send the signal toward Earth. The Death Worlders will answer. And they never come to provide aid. They come to win.